And so now I would love to introduce the wonderful Dr. Anette Edens, who is a clinical psychologist and a published author. Her book, From Monsters to Miracles, is a parent-driven recovery tools that work. And it is widely used in treatment programs across the country. She is the founding member and past president of the Association of Alternative Peer Groups. And she has facilitated the development of Archway Academy. I believe that's the first sober high school in Houston, Texas, which my younger son went to, who doesn't even have a substance use disorder, but definitely needed to go to that high school and thrive through it. We're so grateful for her developing that high school. She has developed and consulted with numerous AAPGs, alternative peer groups programs, for the past 25 years. And her keen insights into the needs of teens and their families as they move through abstinence, adolescence, has earned wide acceptance in academic, professional, and recovery communities. And on a personal note, I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Edens. You know, after I got to a point of feeling really beat up and had a lot of parent shame towards me, I was blessed to be connected through Dr. Anette Edens through Archway Academy. And she counseled me over the phone, and she validated my feelings and my fears, and she guided me to Joe Parker in the Cornerstone program in Houston. And she really educated me about family recovery tools and brought stability and hope back to my family. This was a profound turning point in my life. And it gave me a pathway to gain my confidence as a mother who was parenting a teen with cannabis use disorder and having episodes of psychosis. Her program she also developed prepared me for the relapses my grandson was having. And so when they would come, I had a community to turn to and lean on and get through that time with a lot of tears, but a lot of love and a lot of fun. And I will be forever grateful for that, for her work that provided that community for me. It was a life-saving experience for me. And now I felt very encouraged because of everything I learned through Dr. Edens and the groups that she'd worked, that I wanted to bring this information to all of you so you can experience the same that I've experienced. So Dr. Edens, thank you so very much for being here tonight. I love you. I respect and honor you. And I am forever grateful for all that you have done. So I will turn this over to you.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. Well, now I feel like I don't know if I can live up to that, so my apologies if now it's just nothing but downhill from there. How could I possibly? I've had a really pretty interesting career that was born out of my daughter's drug addiction. And, when I was out of graduate school and had a private practice, plus I was a professor in a small university and kind of thought I knew what, sort of life was about. And my daughter just turned that all on its head for me. She was dealing cocaine at Lamar High School. She was probably the primary supplier there. There were kids coming in and throwing rocks at her window at night. And I felt like I was trying to, protect her from the wolves or something, but really she was the wolf. And it was a rude awakening to me how little I knew after the years and years that I had studied psychology and human behavior and neuroanatomy and spent time in hospitals to realize that we as a profession did not pay attention to addiction at that time. This was in the mid-90s. And and I even did a research project with a student to canvass all of the graduate schools in psychology and psychiatry. And it turned out that something like less than 1% of them had any course that had anything to do with addiction. They just wanted people to go see somebody else because, addicts aren't pleasant to work with. They don't pay their bills. They don't show up for appointments. And professionals don't like to treat them. And that has really turned around where there are huge medical research programs now focused on addiction medicine, and a lot of the major psychiatric hospitals are training their residents and their clinical psychologists in managing addiction, because it just became such a force that they couldn't ignore it any longer. So I started really delving into the material. And by the way, it's really fun for me to see all these names up here because there are a couple of people I know that are sort of in the room, and how cool is that? But the thing that I just had the hardest time with was how could I have missed this? How could I have not seen it? Because it came upon me. She was moody, and she was 15, so she was moody, and that didn't seem like particularly mind-numbing there. But I felt a lot of shame around my daughter's drug addiction, and then she found her way to recovery before I did. She found her way to a recovery program and invited me to participate, which has just been such a blessing. This daughter of mine is amazing. She's 45 years old now. So, she's long since dealt with all of that. But at the time, I didn't have any solutions. And walking into a parent meeting at the time was such a breath of fresh air. It was, I didn't have to pretend I knew anything. I didn't have to protect myself from this group because everybody was just so genuine and honest and open. And I loved that about it. And I also found that everybody, I didn't have a monopoly on pain. Everybody's got pain. Everybody was struggling. And so ultimately, after we had been in the program for a little while, I had a different incident. And if you've read my book, you already know this, but I'm just going to put it out there because it's part of my development. And that is that I had a younger daughter who was had a very tumultuous relationship with her father, and we had gotten divorced. And she was at his house. They got into an argument, and when he went to bed, she shot herself and killed herself with his gun. And his gun was loaded. He kept it in his nightstand or actually, he said he kept it under the bed, on inside the bed. His wife didn't even know. But teenagers know. They snoop. They know everything that you've got in your house. You can't hide anything. And she had it, and she killed herself. And it was such an impulsive, shocking. I can see by the expressions on some of your faces that it's just horrifying. It was 25 years ago, and it's still painful. I still miss her. I'll always miss her. But it was the second time. How could I have not seen this coming? this impulsive little girl. She was so bubbly and cute and funny and smart and just seemed to be on top of the world. And she's arguing with her dad about whether she could go on a date with a boy that was a little older. And, it just seemed like these weren't issues that I considered to be life-threatening. And yet the argument with her dad threw her over the edge, and she just couldn't see her way out of it, and she shot herself. I am so grateful for recovery, because my daughter had 2 years sober at that time. My son wasn't in recovery, but he was older and had a really good, solid grasp on what mattered in his life. And so he sort of worked a program without being ever in any of the rooms. But he and my daughter and I literally sat and stared at the wall for about 4 years. I went to work, came home. They went to school, came home. And it was after the 4th year that that we were having Thanksgiving dinner, and my son said, "Hey, Mom, we're smiling." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, we are smiling. We're gonna survive this." And we did. And at that point, I started getting really involved in the adolescent health. And so I got involved in working with programs that dealt with adolescents. And in that process, I got more and more involved until I was so immersed in it that it was almost like there was nothing else in the world. And but all along, what I noticed was that programs considered the parent program as sort of add-on. Like they treat the kid, or they treat the addict, or the person who is the substance user. I've been told I'm not supposed to use the word addict anymore, and I'm so sorry if I offend anyone, but it's just I'm old. Okay, so I'm not trying to just talk without being too politically correct. But the problem was that most of the counselors were in recovery themselves. They had gotten sober in a program, and they wanted to run a program that focused on the kids the way they had been treated, and without really any keen awareness of how the parents fit into the picture, other than the parents needed to quit trying to be over controlling or trying to be too codependent with their kids. But it was just the meeting. And so I started really working at that point on trying to beef up parent programming, doing the same thing with the parents that you do with the kids, that you have step meetings, and everybody has sponsors and work steps and goes to retreats, and but it's also about having fun, learning how to live your life with some joy again, because this is heavy stuff. I can't tell you how many events I went to, and people say, "Well, how many kids do you have?" And, so at first I used to say, "Well, I had 3, but one's deceased," because I didn't want to leave her out. I felt like that was not honoring her. And then I quit doing that, because people would say, "Oh, how did she die?" And I go, "Oh, well, she shot herself." What? And then that's just the end. That's the end of the conversation. People cannot carry it beyond that. It's just devastating. So I had started sort of learning how to integrate my life history into who I am. And it was like, no, parents go through too much. We're in too much pain. Our children, those young counselors that are 25 years old, cannot get their heads around how much you love your child and how you would do anything on earth for your child. And it doesn't feel in any way reasonable to try to alter, I mean, most of us who are codependent, and I'm certainly one, it's a little hard to set boundaries unless you're a little angry. And so people would wait until they got pretty angry with their kid and then set the boundaries. Well, that's not so healthy. You don't need to wait till you're angry, because then it comes out as not loving. It comes across as either shaming or punishing or criticizing or something. I mean, the boundaries really are about, hey, let's work together on this. I'm your mom. It's my responsibility to keep you healthy, and I want to do that. But let's collaborate, because I'm tired of fighting. We're not fighting, and it just frustrated me so much that the counselors would complain about the parents, like, what are they doing? This parent is going to kill this kid. They keep bringing him food whenever he's hungry, or they keep and I'd say, you got to understand that this is the disease of codependency is just as difficult as any addiction, because we're addicted to our child, and we are wrapped up so intensely in their survival that the idea of doing anything that might hurt them is unconscionable, just inconceivable. So I started working on developing parent programs and trying to encourage other programs to run the parent and kid programs parallel, like they have the same services for the parents as they do for the kids, and the same kinds of activities, and that they get the kids and the parents playing together. I think some of the most amazing experiences I ever had were when there would be a parent-kid function where kids would have one-on-ones with parents, and they'd pick some parent they didn't know or whatever. And I'd go home, and my daughter would come to me and say, oh my gosh, my friend Kathy, had a one-on-one with you today, and she came back and said you were like pretty cool. And I was like, well, I can't possibly, I haven't got a cool cell in my body. So that doesn't, I was never cool. But that her seeing me through somebody else's eyes and not her own, not seeing me as a parent, but seeing me as somebody that was in recovery along with all the other parents, started making a difference to her. And as I stepped into leadership positions, she stepped into leadership positions. And it was just not because she was competitive with me, but it was almost like, well, I'm not going to expect her to do anything that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. That this is a family disease. I'm taking ownership of my part. I'm going to do everything I can do to fix my part. And I can't, that's all I can do. I have no power over, the serenity prayer is so true. There are only some things that you have the power to change, and some things that you've just got to walk away from. So I was having this conversation with one of the dads, and he said, well, what's the book for parents? What book do parents read? I go, well, there's an Al-Anon book, and there are a lot of Melody Beatty codependency books and stuff. And he said, no, I mean really for parents of teens. And I said, well, there isn't one. Yeah, maybe. He said, well, why don't you write one? And I said, why? I'm busy. I'm running this program. I've got, a practice. I've got all these things I'm doing. He said, no, I'll get funding for you. So for 2 years, the foundation that he was associated with funded my salary at Cornerstone. I still ran Cornerstone. I was just there with my door closed, writing this book, and in between whatever else was going on. And the way that I did it was I started having workshops with parents instead of saying, you say the same thing to every parent when they come in, you talk about the same stuff, you give them the same advice, and it gets to be there's got to be a more efficient way to do this. Every parent needs the same information. So I started having workshops. So for the first thing was basically quit paying attention, quit worrying over how this happened, quit worrying about how you got here. Parents would always say, this is not the way I raised my kid. I did not raise my kid to do this. And I would say, well, irrelevant. That's irrelevant. This is where you are. Start where you are and move from there. Because worrying about the past, what you might have done wrong, what maybe you could have done differently, you'll get some clarity about what you can do differently now. But worrying about the past, there's not a moment in your life that you haven't acted with the best intention of parenting your child well. So we're not going to spend a lot of time beating ourselves up in this program. Start where we are. And so those workshops ended up really driving the book. And I remember one time the workshop started and there were only 3 people there. And I was like, where did everybody go? Well, somebody had a flat tire. One of the moms had a flat tire. So, of course, the whole group, being 20 codependents, had to go help her change her tire. And it was just hilarious. It's like everybody wanted to go help, but be the helper. I thought, this is just the most wonderful bunch of people to be around. It's except for that, when you're in a relationship with a codependent, it can be pretty unpleasant. But having them around to change your tire is not a bad thing. But we had fun in the workshops, and people really started talking about the struggles they had in their marriages. There was all this literature that, kids use drugs because their parents are fighting or because their parents are divorced or whatever. But what I was seeing was that parents were getting divorced because their kids were using drugs. They were fighting because their kids were using drugs, and they were fighting about how to deal with that. And they were both in so much pain, they couldn't help each other. So working on some of those relationship issues became really a key to, how do you keep your side of the road clean? How do you share responsibility with a spouse when you don't agree on what needs to be done? How do you work through those conversations? And you have to do it when you're not upset. If you wait till you're upset, it's impossible. And so you have those conversations with a counselor or with a sponsor in a meeting or at home in just with an air of curiosity instead of trying to be right, instead of trying to be the one with the solution. And parents started actually doing that with each other. Trading roles. It's powerful to see parents trade roles. Like somebody would be the enabler and the other would be the enforcer, and they'd be at odds with each other. And the enforcer would say, that enabling parent is going to ruin my child. And the enabling one would, my child has no self-esteem because he's always getting in trouble. So, but I'd get him to switch roles. And the enabler become the one that has to carry out whatever consequences they had agreed upon. And the enforcer had to be the one responsible for nurturing and caring and making sure the kid felt loved. And it was amazing how they could do that. You'd think, when I suggested it, it was almost just tongue in cheek, because I didn't really think they could change roles that readily, but they just did. As soon as the other one became controlling or getting more regimented, oh man, that controlling parent would slack up. It's almost like you have this tacit agreement, covertly, that we have to balance out in some way. So if you get too far this way, I'm going over this way until you're fighting with each other. So it was a way to get people to sort of come together and be both the loving parent and the enforcer, which is what we need to be. Is you enforce the rules, but almost like with regret. Like, I mean, I hate to have to do this to you, sweetheart, but here's the agreement that you violated, and I have committed to telling you the truth and to following through on my promises to you. So I have to carry out this consequence. And I'm sorry, it hurts me too. Not as much as it hurts you, but I can tell you, I don't like that I have to do this, but give me your car keys or give me your cell phone or whatever the consequence is, and enforce it. And you can do it in a loving way. And like, let's talk about how to avoid this in the future. So some of the concepts of trying to work out some of the marital problems within the program was really led to some beautiful reunions within families. And as I had done the workshop series, I ultimately wrote each workshop up as a chapter and published it, and got parents and kids to write their stories. And then I changed, enough details that they wouldn't be identifiable. But interestingly, some parents would say, I gave you my story, but now I'm uncomfortable and I don't want anybody to ever find out that was me. And I thought, oh, I'm so sorry. That's really sad. I mean, I would take those stories out, but man, whoever you are, it is awesome. You're working the work, you're doing the work. We've all made mistakes. But what's great about recovery is that we can laugh at ourselves. I mean, I told my kids I never wanted to ever have to say no to them. That was my parenting philosophy. Now, how smart is that? I don't want to ever have to say no. Well, they knew that I didn't want to say no. They could figure that out. So they could just play me like a fiddle. And fortunately, all the stuff that happened pretty early. But I can tell you, I lost a child in that. I didn't lose her because I had failed to enforce rules or because I wasn't present. But I had argued with her dad about having a gun in the house so many times. And I always felt that somehow I didn't engage him properly to get him to consider that maybe it wasn't such a safe thing to have our 3 children plus his 3 stepchildren, all teenagers, 6 teenagers in the house with a loaded gun. It's a nightmare to think of. I don't know if there was anything that I could have done to prevent that, but it has become part of me. The sadness, the loss, and the missing her, and the talking to her, but what I had to do to develop some resilience around it was to shift from feeling the missing her and agonizing over the loss to celebrating the joy of having had her in my life, of spending more focus. I mean, I had to apologize to her. I was on a mountain at a retreat, and I said, I'm so sorry. I have spent more time feeling pain and missing you than I have celebrating you and what joy you brought into my life. And at that moment when I was talking in my solo experience on the side of a mountain somewhere, this little butterfly started flying around my face. And I was like, oh, it's Molly. She's flying around my face, everything. And I said, there's something about we always want more. When something's good, we want more. And instead of just being satisfied with, just have the good experience. And then the butterfly flew away and I was like, wait, come back. I want more, but and I had to laugh at myself. But so that's kind of how the book came about. I could go on forever about my experiences in recovery and it'd bore you guys to tears. But what I want to know is, what is it that you're hoping to have heard about tonight? What is it that you would like to have some kind of response to, questions that I can answer, or maybe I can't, I don't know, but I can give it a try.
Good evening, everybody. It's very good to see all of you. And thank you so much for your share and for writing the book. I haven't read your book yet, but I'm so looking forward to, because I feel like there is a rainbow at the end of our misery sometimes.
Yes, there is. Thank you.
Yeah. In some ways, I have grown so much from my son's addiction. I have grown so much. I came a little late to your meeting. How long did it take for your daughter how long did it take for her to begin to change?
Well, it took, once she actually started working in the program, it took about 10 months to a year for her to really get fully bought into the fact that this was her life now, that she was going to be in this program and she was going to be in recovery, and that her options leaving the program she was miserable when she was using. She had gotten past the fact that it was fun. At first it was fun, but it got miserable for her. She knew that it wasn't a life she wanted. So yeah, 10 months, I guess, was about when it started turning around. She had some relapses even after that. But then once she was out of the program, we graduated from the program when she was 17, and she had one more year of high school, but that's when her sister died. And so instead of going back to high school, I was teaching at a college, and she went to college with me and started her freshman year there. And so she was kind of in a bubble, not very much in a social world. But when she graduated from college, she took a trip and told me when she came home that she had had a margarita when she decided to do that when she was out of town, as if that would make it somehow safer for her to not go on a bender, because she had to come back home. But I was grateful that she told me, and she did drink for a while, quite a bit. She didn't go back to drugs, but then she got back into recovery after about a year. She never went too far with it. She got back into recovery, and here she is now. She's got a grown child and a solid career, and is just a lovely woman. But that was a long 10 months. It was shorter than most of the families that we worked with.
Yeah. Thank you so much. May God continue to bless you. Thank you.
Yes, and Mary, that.
Yes, thank you. I loved reading your book. I read it while our son was in a 90-day residential facility. It definitely was super. It was one of two books. I think I've read a dozen books, and yours and one other were the only two that I found any kind of practical and comfort, practical advice and comfort. So you're able to do both of those things. It was pretty amazing. So, definitely the boundaries have been the most helpful for us as a family and the most useful for him. What we're having to face now is, how do we explain to him that the boundaries have to change? So he's been in psychosis for over a year now.
Mm-hmm.
And he's staying sober and he's respecting that boundary. That's not the issue. The issue now is he doesn't want to take any medicine or do any kind of program or any kind of therapy. And that is not something we had established before. Mm-hmm. So the only rule we had for him living here was he just couldn't use any substances.
Well, that is such a great question, Mary, and it's something that most families run into because life is not static. I mean, you create the rules and the consequences that are appropriate at the time you create them, and things change. And so it's very appropriate to sit down and say, hey, dude, we did the best we could do when we created these rules, but we're finding that maybe as your parents, we need to tweak them a bit because I don't see that you are doing as well as you can. It's our job to hold you to the best you can be, that we want the best you can be. And we're not going to lower the bar for you. We know you have this issue, but there are solutions, and we're not okay with just sticking with our old rules just because that's what our old rules were. Things change. You grow. I mean, you have different rules for your kid when they're 3 than when they're 13. So, I mean, you just have to change the rules. And it's absolutely within your right to do that. And it's absolutely within his power to decide he's not going to do it. And then you have to be prepared for carrying out whatever the consequences are. And that's the hard part. So if you're ready to take that stand, just be sure that you don't set in place any kind of consequence, potential consequence that you're not ready to enforce. Because if so, you've lied to your kid and they've learned to manipulate you, and you'll lose your own self-esteem as a parent. You'll lose your power. So does that help, Mary?
Yeah. And I think, I have to be ready and my spouse has to be ready.
Yes.
And probably the other members of the family, to be honest. I think we all have to be ready.
Well, it sounds like a family meeting, that this is something we all need to be thinking about. And if you want a couple of days, we'll meet again and see if we can sort of pull together what the solution is. But the way things are right now, it's dangerous for our child, for your brother, for, whatever other family member it may be. And we cannot allow him to go on through his life in a dangerous and unproductive situation when there's every opportunity for him to be able to feel better about himself and do some good.
I like the language around this, and I'm so glad it's being recorded so I can refer back to it. Thank you, Aubrey. Thank you so much.
Well, and that is the important part, Mary, is to just come from such love and respect, and that, you're not trying to force him to eat his peas. You're not trying to cram something that's distasteful down his throat. You're trying to do the best you can do to help him find his way to a joyful, productive life. And he can't do it on his own. He's not equipped.
Dr. Edens, I think too, like, what is difficult, I mean, it's difficult to hold boundaries anyways. And like you said, pick a consequence you can hold and you can stick with and you can live with, because as soon as you wiggle away from that, it's like taking 3 or 4 steps backwards. And when you
Yes, and your child won't respect you. You won't have self-respect. Your child will take advantage of you. You know, it's like, one more chance, Mom. Come on, just one. Won't you just give me one more chance? And no, that's just like saying, okay, use again. You know, it's okay with me if you just use again. No, you don't get a lot of you don't get second chances, in my opinion. But because the consequences are strategic, they're intended to move you to a more productive life, to a higher level of self-esteem. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think it too, like what I was going to share, and there's some questions in the chat. Like now, I mean, I know it happened in the past, but now there's this really intense psychosis, like where it can last a few days or a few weeks, a month, or like with Mary, it's been a year, and for her and her family, and watching her walk through this and navigate through it, and figure things out with a son that's severely delusional and hallucinating. It just adds such a layer to this. And that's, I think, what I'm so interested in, creating such a community where all of us are learning from each other when it comes to the severe psychosis.
Well, what may help is that understanding that the program works for mental illness as well as for substance use. So there was a time, obviously, where marijuana was not so powerful, and there was no such thing as the psychosis or any of the, even addiction. People didn't believe you could become addicted to it because it was not, it didn't have the kind of concentrated THC that it has had in the last 20 years or so. But I mean, back when I was in college, we used to smoke grapevines thinking we might get high. I mean, it was just crazy. But now it's hard for a lot of people to get their heads around the reality of marijuana addiction and the psychosis that goes with it and the debilitating effects it has. But if you had a family member that was schizophrenic, that had delusions and psychoses, you still would have to require them to take their medication to function in the family. It's just the same. You treat the psychosis as if regardless of the origin, they have to follow the medical recommendations, the medications, the whatever kinds of program that they're involved in, and medication compliance becomes one of the rules.
We have a tricky wicket too, that he's been on 7 different medications and none of them have worked.
It's so hard.
That's the problem.
Yeah. And it may take, bipolar disorder is a little more like what you're talking about than schizophrenia is, because schizophrenia responds to medication pretty quickly. Bipolar disorder, the average amount of time it takes to get the right drug cocktail to treat somebody is 7 years. So, we're not very good at understanding why some medications work for some people and not for others. It has something to do with genetics, with DNA, that some certain chromosomes or some certain DNA markers indicate that one drug will work better than another, but those tests aren't readily available, and certainly not for the psychosis that's brought on by from marijuana use. They're just beginning to figure it out for bipolar disorder, and of course, addiction is the bottom of the rung of the medical field. So it's the last thing to get really addressed well. And I'm so sorry you're going through that, Mary, but all you can do is do your best. It's not going to be perfect, and it may not work the way you want it to. It may not have the outcome you want, but you've got to just persevere and gently, lovingly make it clear that he's got to comply. He's got to keep trying.
Can this language be spoken to a 31-year-old who lives outside the home? So this type of recovery language. What about that?
I don't think I maybe understand the question. Let me look in the chat and see.
I think what Mary's asking is the boundaries, the consequences, how does this type of recovery language?
Oh, yes, I see. It's Mary by the Bay asking this question. Yeah, of course. Yeah, it can. And it's harder with a 31-year-old who lives outside the home, but most of the ones that are adults living outside the home are wanting some kind of support and relationship with their family, maybe needing their family to, pay their cell phone bill or pay, whatever. And you can use anything that they ask of from you as leverage to say, there's only one condition, and that is because I love you too much to watch you suffer. I will do anything I can do for you as long as you're doing for you what we know that you need to be doing. And otherwise, I can't collude in your self-destruction. And it's hard and painful. And, sometimes the adult child will try to punish you and, withdraw from you and not be around for a while. But if your child does that, is gone, disappears, because they don't want to be compliant, don't just ignore them. I mean, don't just accept them back under any circumstances, but send them those hopeful messages, text messages, loving messages. Stay a little bit connected, just so they know that you're not. Sometimes they think things as stupid as that you're going to be relieved not to hear from them. That's just not true. But and maybe there are days when you're relieved not to hear from them. Actually, that can be true. But as long as they know that you're loving them and hoping from afar that they're considering the things that you talked about. I don't know if that helps you, Mary, but absolutely, yes, I would encourage you to.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you. Yeah. Because he's still 17 years of age, really.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, I don't want to delay. Thank you so very much. That was so helpful.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Then Cindy asks, can you elaborate on why they're not equipped from your experience? I think when you were commenting about that.
Oh, okay. And I'm not sure I remember whatever I said there, but who it's not equipped for what?
Cindy, are you here to want to check?
Yeah.
Okay.
When you had said, what did you say that? Now I don't remember what you said.
She was speaking to Mary Moss about changing boundaries and.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, I do remember. Why they're not.
Callie.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it's like the brain that has the problem really doesn't have the resources to think their way out of the problem. So if you're not wanting to comply with your rules and you decide, and then somebody says, okay, well, now we have to change the rules because things aren't getting better. They're not equipped to think that through for themselves. They'll just think that they're a victim and this is a horrible thing has happened to me and I can't do anything about it. And everybody better take care of me. And they'll go that way. They may get angry. They may get abusive, but, or just get depressed and never, get off the couch. I don't know exactly what's going on with that kid, but I know that the kid who is struggling does not have the mental capacity. They're just not equipped with the tools to find their way out of the problem. And so one of the things Aubrey and I talked about before is that those kids who have gone through recovery and stayed sober for a little while and really understand recovery and then relapse, they know what they need to do to get healthy. They've got the tools. They will make that decision when they make that decision, and you can remind them they have the tools, but that's not necessarily going to help. But the ones that haven't really fully embraced the problem or the etiology of the problem or looked at the myriad solutions that they may have to deal with just don't have the capacity to think through the solutions like an adult does.
Kind of like to the executive functioning. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly.
Okay.
They don't have it. They don't have it. It's both the analytical thinking and also just the quantity of information.
Okay.
They'll go online and look up stuff, but then they come back with stuff like, well, God made marijuana as an herb and I should be able to smoke, So
Yeah, we break that in time or two.
yeah, a lot.
And then I just lost my job and I'm working part-time with very little money. Son also diagnosed with major depressive disorder. This is the same mom who says her son is vaping THC every day.
Mm-hmm.
Has horrible anger outbursts, she believes he needs residential treatment at this point, but how does she find a reputable place that she can afford? She says she feels frozen.
Okay, I wish I had the absolute answer for that. There are a couple of things that I know that you can do. There are some state-funded, very good rehabilitation facilities that you have to qualify for by getting evaluated at the Council on Recovery, or at least the last time I talked to anybody there, they were still doing that. And also there are places in mental hospitals, almost all have a free bed that they set aside for situations that are dire. You can call Menninger Hospital and say you're desperately in need of some help, and they'll look at whether or not they can bring you into that program and evaluate your child and guide you in a direction that will be affordable for you. So don't let somebody just tell you, well, the price is $20,000. So if you don't have it, don't go. No, just say, I know you've got to have some kind of program of beds set aside for community health. And so please just tell me what I need to do to be considered for that. And they may tell you you can't do it and you have to just hang up and try somebody else. But unfortunately, and there are good, you don't really even want your kid to go to one of those like Malibu by the sea country club kind of places. It's like, no, they're already mostly entitled by the time they get to treatment, and they feel like, you owe them something because they've had such a hard time. And so, no, it's okay if they're getting their treatment in a trailer park. It doesn't matter. It's the quality of the human beings, not the surroundings. Some of those really fancy places, the treatment isn't that great.
That's a really good point. I could say personally, with my experience, Archway Academy, I sent my younger son there. He didn't have a substance use disorder, but had mental health challenges because of his sibling and his father's still a substance use disorder. They worked with me. They looked at my income and they came up with a fee that I could afford. And it was substantial less because they do fundraising. For families like mine that couldn't afford it. The same thing with Cornerstone. When I went to Joe Parker and said, I really need your counseling, I can't, what is your fee? Of course, he deserves every penny for his fee, but I could not personally afford it. So he negotiated a fee that I could afford. And so without all that support, I know treatment in general is not affordable, but ask those questions because a lot of programs don't work with you. So
Right.
very good. The whole family needs to hear these discussions.
It'd be great if everybody's interested in learning what they can learn. And, I hope I've provided enough information that it's helpful. For Kathy, when they're in psychosis out of the house and will not stop smoking, man, that is terrifying as a parent. And my heart is with you. They will get the consequences that they get in our culture, which is likely to be an arrest. You can't count on it. There are mental health divisions of the police department that are better equipped at dealing with somebody that's psychotic, but they're not always available, when there's an incident. And so Kathy, this is just a time when you got to just rely on your group, your friends, your higher power, or whatever, because you are powerless unless your child is underage. If your child's underage, you can call them in as a runaway and they'll try to find them. But no, you're just in a very, very stuck position. And
I keep waiting for, kind of like you're saying, it's like horrible to think that you want something to happen, but something so that change can start, right? And we can start
right. Yeah.
Better. And
well, you would hope it would be a call from jail where they would say that they've taken him to the Harris County Psychiatric Center, which is what they'll do if he's psychotic, and the police can recognize that. But
it's just a really difficult. You just don't have the control that.
Oh,
somebody's psychotic. You can say things like lovingly, but they don't necessarily take it lovingly, right?
Yeah, they don't necessarily. They may not even hear the words that you say.
He said the other day, I said something I thought was very like calm and loving, and he was like, "How dare you say that to me?" It's like he's not hearing what I'm saying. So
he's got his own dialogue going in his head too. Yeah. So sorry. Yeah.
Ali, would you like to go next?
Yeah, because she brought up legal in court and all of the situations. So this will actually be our third encounter with the court system. And so I'm preparing to advocate again for my child, but this time in another state. He is underage. He is a minor. So any suggestions, recommendations? So the first time around, he was on probation and did an outpatient substance abuse program. The second time around, we got him to a 90-day residential treatment facility. So now this will be our third time. I'm just trying to prepare myself on how to advocate for him. And so any suggestions, ideas, things to bring to the court to do that?
One of the hard things about that is that you're advocating for him may get a little bit in his way, because the judge will think, well, they keep trying to find the easy way out, get him into a program or get him in, but if he's committed an offense.
Well, he's been in detention. I mean, he's spent multiple days in detention. When he came back after his 90-day treatment, he spent 37 more days in detention. So he spent 17 days, went for 90-day treatment, spent 37 more days.
Is he psychotic or is he lucid? I mean,
he's lucid. He holds a job. I think
that you're working harder than he is on his recovery. And that's a really hard place to be. Of course, most of us do that to some extent. But but it may be that you have to kind of just lovingly say, man, what do you want me to do, my dear son? You're the only one that can help yourself. I can't convince the judge. So when are you going to make the decision that you're tired of this stuff? And that I know that you don't want to let him down by just not showing up or anything like that. But I think it's a conversation that would be worth having with him of, you follow through on your part whenever he's gotten in trouble, but he doesn't follow through on his part. And that's just not a formula that will last long term. And so if he's ready, then how's he going to prove to you that it's worth you, jumping through hoops to try to rescue him from yet another bad situation? I've known several families whose child turned around in prison. And I'm not suggesting that you want that to happen. But what I'm saying is that they have to reach a point where they're sick of dealing with their life the way they're dealing with it. And it's nobody's responsibility but their own to get them out of it. And I have one of my best friends, who's also a psychologist, has a son who was very violent when he was on drugs, and he was assaulting people, and he got multiple. His final assault was a assault of a police officer, which is just stupid. Why would you do that? But he was drunk and he assaulted a police officer, and she went to the court and she said, "But Your Honor, it's been 7 years since he assaulted anybody." And the judge said, most people go a lifetime without assaulting anybody, so I'm not impressed with 7 years. And he had to do 2 years in prison. And he came out and he is now the best guy. He's married with kids and runs his own landscaping business. And of course, he's a convicted felon, so he can't have a normal kind of job, but he's running his landscaping business and doing very well. But he had to have that experience. He was just going to keep doing it. I don't know what to tell you, Callie. I don't know if your son is anything like that, or if
Very stubborn.
Yeah. Well,
So thank you. That's great advice. I really appreciate it. I needed to hear that because you're right. I am working harder than him.
we did that when we're codependent. The worse they do, the harder we try. It's just crazy, but we do it, and until we don't. Yeah.
Maria put in the chat, would you feel comfortable sharing details about your son's recovery and how you were able to support him even though he wasn't following a specific program? Thank you, Dr. Edens.
Oh, okay. Sure. He did not like the program that my daughter was in. And so we made rules and said, we wanted him to go to the program she was in, and then I was in the parent program. But he didn't, he made a deal with us that just said he was going to commit to being sober, that he would not, that I could do a drug test, hair test, whatever I wanted to do randomly whenever I wanted to do it. And that he had a very close, he had a close relationship with a guy that was sort of like a mentor for him, that had been a graduate student with me, but he was younger and kind of cooler. And so he met with him and hung out with him some. And basically, he didn't get the quality of program that he would have gotten if he had worked a 12-step program, but he did get through high school, through college, And now he's a therapist and works in my office with me. You know, I mean, not because I wanted, you know, I mean, he chose the field. I mean, it worked for him, and he chose the field, and now he's, it's awesome to work with your kid, you know, because you get to see him every day and watch him be an adult. You know, of course, he's almost 50, so he's definitely better act like an adult. I mean, that'd be pretty pathetic, but you know.
That's cool. Lisa asked you, can you let me know about a 90-day residential program and how to get a program like that from the beginning? My son is in a psychiatric hospital and will be released soon, and I believe he needs more than 30 days. I have spoken to several programs that say that it's up to his clinicians once he enters the 30-day program. I am doing my best to require him to go to rehab treatment after leaving a psychiatric hospital. Thank you.
You know, that's just so hard because you can't, you can't dictate how long they stay in a program. The program personnel have to be the ones to decide when he's met the criteria for discharge or met the criteria for continuing hospitalization or rehabilitation. So the programs that I know, I mean, I don't know any programs that would just say, yes, we're a 90-day program. What you can do is require him to go to a residential program that's a minimum of 30 days and follow an aftercare plan that would last up to 2 years. Then he goes into a program that's like a Cornerstone or some alternative peer group program that would keep him. I mean, the aftercare after residential treatment is the most important part because anybody can stay sober if you're locked up. But when you come out and you have to be working in the world, it's tough. And so having a strong aftercare program that's not just a contract, like I'm not going to hang out with the bad kids and I am going to, you know, obey my mother and stuff like that. It has to be like a program like Joe Parker's program. And those programs keep them engaged for a year or two. And that is long enough for them to learn how to function within freedom in recovery.
Thank you.
So I would reiterate that what Dr. Edens said is that was where we failed, right? We had a great residential program, but they wanted them to do intensive outpatient, and we don't have any services like that in our area. And so we were trying to develop that with him, and it backfired fast 10 days later. So I think that's the key to is keeping them in some sort of long-term recovery program.
Yes, in freedom. Because once they're out of captivity, you know, they get out. The average length of discharge before relapse is most 90% relapse in the first couple of weeks that they come home from. And it's not their intent. They intend to stay sober. It's that they haven't learned yet how to be sober in the world. So thanks for adding on to that, Callie.
That would exactly happen with my son. He would relapse right out of treatment. And then, so the last treatment is where we were blessed to find the Cornerstone program through Dr. Edens. So, and that's what's more long-term. Well, thank you. Lisa, you have your hand up.
My circumstance is quite different from everybody. My sister is the one that is suffering from the marijuana challenges for many, many years, and she's in her mid-40s. But with all of the codependency skills that I've learned over the years and enablement and a lot of these things, there's a lot of pieces left that are still extremely confusing and very crippling for me, because the position I'm in is, it's just very confusing. And the very specific emotion I get when it even comes to the idea of her is terror. I've never felt terror in my life. And I think it's just a result of her mind having dealt with this substance for a very long time. And she has underlying bipolar challenges, and just dozens and dozens of enablers. So my entire family are all of that. So I play this role to her, and I feel like I have crosshairs on my forehead from her. It is a visceral somatic feeling that is indescribable. I have nightmares of her hunting me. And I can go into the weeds about pursuing my own therapy and counseling around a lot of this, which is in a lot of ways has made it worse, because that space has a lot of its own challenges. But I would really like to hear if there's anything in particular as a sibling, an adult sibling, in this circumstance to not feel like I'm literally being hunted by her,
The sibling stuff is so hard. There's not a lot of literature about it. Most of the codependency books don't address sibling issues. But if you ask any of the teens in recovery how their siblings are doing, they don't know what I'm going through. They don't even notice that I'm, using, or that I'm in trouble or whatever. It's out of their perception that they're affecting their siblings. It's how can they not know that they're damaging their siblings, but they are. And so, yeah, I mean, your best bet, is doing what you're doing, is focusing on your own self-care. You're powerless to fix your sister, to protect yourself from being somehow used and abused is difficult, but you have to do it. And so if you can do it in the most loving way possible, like, telling her you've always just loved her so much, and she's just such a huge part of your heart, and that you hope that she'll be okay, and that you can't do anything that's going to make it worse for her. And she may not understand or believe it, but it'll make it worse for her if you're enabling her.
I do have one last question, and it's really specific to this codependency thing. She's constantly telling me, because my mom funds her whole life, she says, don't tell mom that I'm going to Disneyland, or don't tell mom, this and this. And I become paralyzed, and I don't have really control over it. The somatics, kick in.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sort of in this position of, and I've tried to inform my mom a bit, like, by the way, but I'm like, I feel like I don't need to be in that position.
No, you don't.
I need to be completely out of her world. And I just need to kind of get a visual of what that could look like, and then I can kind of, So.
Right. And the thing is that it's very clear to you that it's not healthy for you to be operating in secrecy. Our secrets, that is all when you're triangulated into a relationship, and you're having to lie to your mom, or having to lie to that won't work for you. And you can tell her that in your own therapy, you've discovered that you cannot keep secrets for other people, that you're not going to be the vault for her, that you wish you could help her, but that's not the way that you can, because of your own, what you're discovering about yourself, and that you love her and you wish her the best, but that you will not be holding secrets, and that if she tells you something, that she can be pretty sure that you'll let whoever she's talking about know that you've had the conversation. So she should filter what she's saying to you.
Thank you.
And it maybe that'll help, maybe it won't. She'll probably get mad. But I know in my family, I had to say to my parents, anything you say to me about my sister, I'm going to tell her. Anything you say to my sister about me, she's going to tell me. So you might as well just tell us to our faces. But my parents both would call me to complain about my sister, call my sister to complain about me. And then, it wasn't until we finally got honest with each other that they were doing that we got very close. And my dad tried to write it on a napkin one time. We were at dinner, like, well, let me tell you what your sister did. And I was like, no, I don't want to hear it. And he started writing on his napkin. And I was like, no, I don't want to hear. But it's crazy how families do that. It's like, people feel good trying to have a common enemy or something. I don't know. But if she's taking advantage of your mother and wanting you to keep secrets from your mom, that damages your relationship with your mom. I mean, you can't do that. So, good luck with that. I'm sorry. Glad you have a therapist. Complicated.
Very good advice, Dr. Edens. I'm sure carrying on other people's secret pulls us down. It's not healthy for us.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the main thing, to make sure that you're expressing when you're dealing with your kids or your siblings or whatever, is that when you set boundaries, it's not because you're trying to control them. It's because you're trying to make your own life work. You can't live with somebody that's drunk all the time or somebody that's high all the time. It's, what a delightful group you are. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to hang out with you guys this last hour and a half. And
we are delighted you are here. And we can each of your words of wisdom and experience. And your vulnerability, sharing how you walk through the challenges of your life, and we give you our condolences. Thank you, Donna. Thank you for sharing her with us tonight. The important messages all around for all of us. And you're always talked about, Dr. Edens, in many private Facebook groups, public Facebook groups, social media. Everybody's always talking about Dr. Anette Edens and Monsters to Miracles. So we're looking for another book, even though she wants to be retired. I know conversation with you. No pressure, but if you feel like writing another book, I think we would definitely appreciate that. But if you decide not to, we will still.
Christine? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Oh, look, I keep thinking, I have a ton of books in my head, but then I think, I could sit down and start writing, or I could, work a jigsaw puzzle. And I choose the puzzle. I mean, I guess I just I lost the fire for getting the written thing done, but maybe I will.
Can I ask one final question?
Sure.
After reading the book and loving the book, is there any common pitfalls that you noticed that are us codependents or the parents or siblings or whatever that we kind of tend to fall into? Like, I feel like I did read the book. I've taken it to heart. I've certainly learned a lot. It certainly works when you put it into practice. But are there certain things that you notice that, okay, it's in the book. I said to do these things and you guys are kind of not doing this part, or this is a common pitfall, or
it's just very common for codependents to relapse, just like people with addiction problems relapse. When you have people ask you to do something and you don't want to do it, and you say yes, and you think, why did I say that? And what am I doing? And it's like, it's just when it's your nature to be codependent, you just, the main thing tends to be that you don't want to let anybody down.
Well, it's interesting you say that because my son, when he decided to go off the medications, I said, I'm just really worried. I don't want you to go backwards. And he goes, and I don't want you to go. And he just turned around and said, no, I don't want the same for you. I don't want you to go backwards. Isn't that interesting?
And it's interesting. So you need to stick to your guns, not lower the bar for him, and make sure that he understands that you've got some requirements and that, you care about each other. That's a beautiful thing.
We thank Dr. Edens very much for being with us tonight. We love you.